Men are struggling in almost every way imaginable. Suicide, addiction, homelessness, a general sense of being lost in today's society, and they are often criticized. The purpose of this podcast is for men to understand their struggles and understand solutions. The two men I'm joined by today are actively working on solutions for men. They run a men's group here in Prince Edward Island. They studied this subject for a better part of a decade, and they're connected to men's groups across the country. I'm joined today by Bob Terpstra and Rynier Carpendale, so they can share what they've seen are solutions for men. How you guys doing? Thanks for coming here.
Oh, great, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Why don't you guys introduce a little bit about what you're doing with the men's group and why it's beneficial for men from what you've seen?
You want me to go?
Go. You
I'll go first.
One. Yeah, you do this one.
Well, the men's group, it's called The Forge. We meet every 2 weeks, bi-weekly on Monday nights, and it's been going for a little over 5 years. And there's normally about, like a dozen to 20 guys on a typical night, all from St. John's Presbyterian Church in Belfast, or, guys from the community. Maybe you can say a bit like kind of what a typical night looks like and what are some of the other things that we've done.
Yeah, the format is in some ways it would be part AA group, part guys barbecue, kind of mix.
Sounds like a party.
Yeah, it is. It's light and or super deep. Like some of the nights you're just like you're really scraping into the depths of some of our souls, and other nights it's just talking about where things are at, what the week's been like, what life has been like. As far as your question to what the purposes of it or how why it's beneficial, I think what it's allowed us is a sense of, I can maybe tell the story a little bit later at some point, but where it came out of, but what it's allowed us is a sense of community. And I think a lot of men these days, I know you'd agree, feel alone. Like they're either doing life alone or like they're the only ones struggling with, which I know is a big part of what you're doing here. And man, they're basically every time someone shares a thing, even 5 years in, there's still that sense of like, I'm going to be the only guy, or this will be a thing that's just me. And even after 5 years of everyone else going like, no, I get that. There's still more of that. I'll just add one of the things that we love about the group is that it's intergenerational. We have the youngest guy right now would be 23 and the oldest would be 76. Wow. So really spreading that gap, which is an intentional thing that I think we really love about it.
Yeah, like the Forge, every week at church when they do announcements, they always say it's a place for all men to belong. So there's an intentionality about creating an environment, an atmosphere every week, every time we meet that is that's welcoming, where every guy can feel like he can share or doesn't have to share. But yeah, like Rynier said, there's nights where we go super deep. We open up the Bible, we get deep into, what God's kind of been speaking to us. And then other nights, like tomorrow night, we're going to have a Nerf war through the whole church. It's going to be awesome.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun.
So like just
and nachos,
nachos and Nerf.
Nerf and
nachos.
Wow.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, you gotta have the fun.
Quality Monday night, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Would you say that it was lack of community and feeling alone? Would you say that's one of the biggest things, if not the biggest things, that men struggle with currently in today's world? I mean, if there was
Yeah.
If there was a main thing. I mean, you guys have you seen that a lot?
Yeah, I think that's most. I think that's most men's experience these days, is this sense of aloneness, and like there's lots of factors to that. I think the rise of social media, and feeling more connected than ever, but yet still so distant from each other in real face-to-face interactions. I think there's a gap that's made us feel alone in just not having those historical traditional places where men normally used to gather. Church attendance has been on the decline. Men's groups and sports groups, especially over COVID, there's been a lot of that kind of on the decline. So yeah, like I think the world, the UN listed loneliness as an epidemic, and is is the equivalent of a carcinogen, of like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, that feeling of loneliness. So I think there's something biological that's going on there that's really hurting men's health. It's causing shorter life, shorter life in the sense of like men's suicide is on the rise, but also like towards the end of life, it's literally taking years off your life to not feel connected. So I think there's that big part of the Forge, of that, hey, every 2 weeks, I know I'm going to sit in a group of guys, I'm going to look them in the eye, and we're going to talk about something that's real, whether it's diving deep into scripture, or it's playing a game, or it's sharing, shit hit the fan this week, or my marriage isn't doing so well, or whatever it is, and having a guy kind of look you in the eye, hear you, pray for you, give you advice, whatever it is. So yeah, I think loneliness for sure is one of the biggest things that I think men are feeling, and that feeling of connectedness, of like being with other guys. I think there's a big sense of loneliness even within like the church. Like I think there's a lot of guys that go to church every week and see other guys in the pews, but like that is not men's ministry. That's not connectedness. I think like it has to just be guys.
Yeah.
And talking about guys things for there to be that sense of like deep togetherness, and I'm with you and I hear you and I understand what's going on. I think there's been this kind of like, men don't really connect on a Sunday morning with all that goes on in a Sunday morning. There has to be our own space. Yeah. So men's spaces have been on decline, and I think that's a big part of the rise of like men feeling alone.
I think, and I would add to that as on top of the reality of our loneliness is the just sort of what is natural to men, which is just to retreat.
Yeah.
Right. And to hide, or to sit in some shame, or to pose, putting up a front.
I was going to say, like with church, like an example, in my experience, like I'm curious if you guys have seen this as well. It's almost like that happens in other areas of life as well, where like, maybe you have coworkers that are men, or you're even like, you're in the same space as other men, but it's that leap of actual connection. I think you see that almost everywhere. It's like, it's hard to, it seems like it's I know, like I've struggled, like it's hard for men to take the next step of connection. In most places, it seems like.
One of the things I find, and I was going to add to the idea of loneliness, is, as far as things men are struggling with right now, is this feeling that we all have, that we're supposed to know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. I'm supposed to have what it takes. I'm supposed to be prepared. I'm supposed to whatever. And I think a lot of the times it feels like stepping out for connectedness. Like, you've got a coworker and you want to, deepen that friendship or make a relationship that's more than just surface level. That feels needy. Yeah. And that feels like something that you're not supposed to do or allowed to do. Yeah. Like there's a way in which that's like, well, I don't know if that's a permission thing but I think for a lot of guys, that's what holds us back, is that like, well, there's an expectation that I have of myself and that I think other men have of me. And I don't want to be the guy that doesn't have it or know it or have it all together or whatever that expectation is that, right? That would you like, and so I think what that does is it means real, because even with that, even with the Forge, part of that is not just the loneliness. It's the, like, every 2 weeks, someone is going to check in. It's the accountability of relationship where someone's going to be like, no, how are you actually? And how are things really going? And you can slip, even after years in that, you can slip back into like, yeah, man, it's great. No, things are good. And you still have to kind of push on people and go, no, like, how is your heart? How are you? You know, how are you as a man? How are you? Where are you? And there's always something going on underneath. But I think that's something as men that we don't offer each other enough, is either a space to do that or the permission to say, yeah, listen, man, you can dig in, you know, with me. And cause I'm going to need that. I'm going to need you to come after me.
Yeah. What's that quote? Is it Chesterton or Roosevelt or somebody? Is most men live quiet lives of desperation. Yeah. Like every guy is going through some battle, some hardship that they need to be talking about.
That they're not going to bring up.
That they're not just, it's not going to come up in a regular conversation. So for them to feel safe among men and work out those things in a community of men, that's the only place I think where they can feel not just safe, but feel like other men give each other permission to be men. And other men, I think, are the only ones that can actually give to bestow masculinity. So, like when a man, I think, goes to his work or a woman with this question in his heart of like, do I have what it takes? Am I good enough? Am I man enough? Can I win? Whenever he brings that question to his work or to his significant other or wife or whatever, like they can't answer that. I think only men can answer that for each other, to be like, man, like I believe in you. You have what it takes. Yeah. I'm rooting for you. You know, that type of like affirmation is like oxygen to a guy's soul. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. It's crazy how much that's missing in today's world. Like you saying that, like we had met one time before and you had said something along those lines, and that just made so much sense to me. You know, because I think like even with relationships, and I'd like, you know, interested in you guys' take on this, like opening up, men struggle sometimes opening up to their spouse, or they do too much. You know, or maybe it's like kind of what you guys are saying along those lines of like, it's not the right place. You know what I mean? Like, because I do believe that. I think that there's certain things that can only be understood by other men. Yeah. And we go looking for it in other places, and that it ends up not being always helpful.
I think a lot of guys, in this culture now, I think men are told, be more vulnerable. Share your feelings more. Yeah. And then when a guy does, either to his girlfriend or his wife, or like in a group, to a counselor or something, and then it doesn't go the way they thought. There isn't this reciprocal, that they don't say what you needed to hear. But like when you tell another guy like, hey man, like I've been really struggling with porn, or I've been really, feeling like I'm never going to succeed at business. Like whatever it is, that other guy can look you in the eye and be like, yeah, man, I get that. Yeah. And like that knowing that other guy actually understands where you're coming from. Yeah. You're not going to get that in other relationships. So I think a lot of guys who have gone out on that, who have kind of stepped out there and been like, yeah, okay, I'm going to share my feelings. And then like, it's like a crash and burn, or they don't get what they need. Then they just shut down even more, retreat even more.
Right.
And it's also not knowing how to share, right? I think part of this is language, and space. And that's where a group and I just want to kind of push this back as well, just what we're talking about. Like there's, I said sort of like an AA format. And I think we all still have that stigma a little bit of like, AA or NA are for like the guys who couldn't cut it, who need that thing. And that is just like, we're all struggling with addiction. Like every man I know is addicted to something. Maybe it's your phone, maybe it's porn, maybe it's affirmation, maybe it's success, maybe it's money, maybe it's whatever it is. You have an addiction. It's just some addictions are way more destructive and some addictions are way more obvious to everyone else. But I think what AA has gotten and tapped into is the community aspect of going through these things. But I do want to say, like, this, what we're talking about has worked in our context. By a group, we didn't start a group. It was more like, we're in a community. These are the men we want to be tapping into. And when we get together, there's enough of us to make a group. But what we're talking about can be two guys, right? I mean, for the guys who are listening or watching, this is not about go and find a group that really all it takes is I mean, really three. You know, Bob and I have a third friend, and we've been friends for 12 years, and we kind of just started on this journey, and really the Forge has come out of this. You know, a lot of what we've done has come out of this relationship of the three of us, where we've earned trust and we've given each other permission, and it's a united, like, man, I want to be a better man. I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better father. I want to become better at being a man. And I don't have the tools or the language for that. So let's work on that together. And you can trip and you can fail, and there's grace. Like, you need a ton of grace for this kind of thing. You need guys who are not going to judge or show or compare or compete in it. That part, which I think is, I'll share this because I found it really interesting. I went to school in South Africa. I was born and raised in South Africa, then came to Canada for a few years and went back for high school. And I went to an all boys school for high school, which has had, after 8 years in like Canadian schools, right? I mean, how we've all kind of gone co-ed, and went back to the school, and it was one of the top schools in South Africa. And South Africa has like an English system. So for anyone who's read Harry Potter, it was like that, just without the magic.
Magical.
But yeah, but it was like there were houses and prefects and hierarchy, you know. It was from grade 8 to 12, and like grade 12s were the only students who were allowed to walk on the grass. Like, no one else in the school is allowed to walk on the grass. And there's this whole like hierarchy thing that happened. But we had a headmaster there who had been
Dumbledore. No, I'm just kidding.
I wish. He'd been in school. He'd been teaching for like 50 years, and we had a sister school that was an all girls school. And he used to say, like, all the time, he would say, boys need all boys schools and girls need co-ed schools. And what he was talking about was something I think you can tap into with like popular culture. If you name top 5 movies you know of that are about a group of women, it's going to be and I'm not saying this is the reality, but there's an idea behind it where it's catty. It's, you know, there's a lot of interpersonal, there's like lying and backstabbing, and, you know, it's like sorority kind of idea. And if you watch top 5 movies you can think of about men, you're going to get Band of Brothers. You're going to get, you know, like these epic male bonding scenarios. And I think it taps into something where men just need space to be with other men. And when they thrive. And what sort of brought me into this line of thinking was I went to the school, 500 teenage boys. Half of them were their boarding school. So like eating, sleeping, like everything all together, day in and day out. And I was there for 3 years, and there were 2 fistfights.
Wow.
In 3 years, because there are no girls.
Nothing to fight over.
No one to impress. Right? You want to give a guy a hug, you just give a guy a hug. You're not worried about like, oh, she's going to think I'm gay. You know, or whatever that is. Yeah. Whatever the thing is that you're worried about, whatever that thing is you're afraid of, there's none of that, because that as soon as you have that co-ed atmosphere, that suddenly for guys puts walls up in a way that just I mean, you think of a locker room, or you think of a sports team, the way guys interact in that space, you think of the guys in a sports team locker room as opposed to once they get out on the field or the pitch or the ice, it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And so there is something that men, where men don't have women around, it allows them a freedom to not perform, not pose, you know, not put up masks, not compete, and that the not competing part is just so integral to what we're talking about, because this has to be a place where you're safe enough to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's very interesting. I haven't thought about it like that at all.
I have another kind of story in the same kind of veins. I worked at an all boys camp for about 4 years, and at this in the Muskokas in Ontario, and at this all boys camp, same kind of vibe, like just
Playful,
if you've never lived with just a bunch of guys and not seen a girl for like a few weeks, you just don't know what it's like. It really is just a different atmosphere. It just feels like a different world where like the masks come off, like you can just relax. Like I remember just being around, and like, so you have your campers, boy campers, and then you have your staff, like, senior high and college age guys, and the level of camaraderie and brotherhood and encouragement was just unbelievable. So we would do 2-week sessions with these campers, and one day out of those 2-week sessions, we would invite the girl camp from across the lake over for lunch. And
everything changed.
Oh my gosh. These boys, like these campers and counselors even, who you just thought were, man, these guys are the coolest, like so well spoken, put together. Everybody thinks they're one of the coolest guys at camp. They just became the weirdest, like what is wrong with this kid? Like acting like an idiot, like making fun of people, like just became a total douchebag, like in like 2 seconds, because there's a bunch of girls there. Totally changes all the dynamics.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it was really, and same thing with the girls. Like they literally couldn't tell the girls they were going to boys camp until like 5 minutes before they were leaving, because the girls would just spend, like they've done before, where the girls would just spend the whole afternoon like getting their makeup ready to go over and see the boys. So there is something different about, guys being separate. And I think there's something very powerful in, guys having those spaces for sure.
Hugely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having that space to relax and just be men, just be masculine.
Yep.
Did you, having an experience of both worlds, did that have an effect on you, or did that kind of imprint you at a young age?
Yeah, man, that's such a good question. It ties into actually the origin story for the Forge, which is so Bob and I, and like I said, we have this third friend, John.
We won't say his name. John.
Or is it John? All of our friends are like, which one is it? Just kidding. Anyway, and there was a fourth, there's a fourth guy who's moved now, but and the four of us had these years together of really amazing Christian community, living life together. All of our first and second, I mean, Bob and John and I, all of our 4 kids were born the same years, all 4, unplanned. But we just shared a lot of stages in life. But anyway, so 6 years ago, or 5 years ago, before the Forge started, we would get away probably once or twice a year to a cabin and just kind of like hang out, and you just eat a lot of meat and you go swimming and play Nerf and just kind of like be dudes for a weekend and get away, watch a war movie, basically all the things you're supposed to do as men, I guess. And so we were sitting at one of those weekends, and I said to them, I was like, guys, I went to 12 schools in 12 years. I moved around a ton growing up. And other than that time at that boys' school, where I had these 3 other guys who were really good friends, I was like, I've always felt like I'm sort of like the guy on the outside, even in a group of my friends. Even in a group where you're like, these are the 6 of us, we all go together, but it's like I just didn't feel in that group. And I was sitting there with the 3 of them, and we were just hanging out, and I was like, I can't even remember how I put it, but I remember it was affecting me, like really impacting me. Just the feeling of belonging to like I feel like I belong to this group of friends. like if the three of you are going out, you're like, oh, we're missing Rynier. We have this joke about like the three musketeers, you know, the guy who's not missing, or the three little pigs, or the three whatever. The guy who's missing, and then the fourth guy's, you know, he's out. But it's like, oh man, like that belonging, and that became the impetus when we started the Forge, because I was going to start this men's group and ask people to get together, and I was talking to them about it. I was like, how do I get guys on board with this? And Bob was actually the one. We were driving back the night before the Forge started. We were driving back from this weekend, and Bob says, well, like what you were sharing with us yesterday is what guys want. Why not just invite them into that? And so when we sat down the first night of the Forge, and it's like men's groups in the church, everyone's done it before, and everyone's kind of waiting, like, how is this different, you know? And I'd spent the whole day writing up this like vision statement of what we were going, and the two things were to battle and to belong. And so the idea is you belong to this group, but this group also belongs to you. There's in two ways, right? I mean, you belong here in that we want you, but this group also belongs to you in that you have ownership of it, and you have some responsibility to it. And the battle part is, I want to show up in your life for the things that are hard for you, but I can't do that unless you tell me what they are. Right? Like at that time, I was sleeping on the couch probably a night or two a week. My wife and I are going through a really rough time. And I was like, guys, I'm sleeping on the couch a night or two a week. No one's checking in on my marriage because I'm not telling anyone that my marriage is struggling. You can't show up for me. You can't battle for me. You can't check in on how I'm growing as a husband, how I'm loving my wife, what I need to change. Am I seeing a counselor? You can't come and ask me those hard questions if I'm not first saying, by the way, I need help. And I laid that out. And the 20 guys who were there were all like, okay. And they bought in. And that has been, you know, and within a year, one of the guys was going off to rehab, and a lot of the different things that have come. I mean, we've had some marriages that are saved. We've had some families that have stayed together. We've seen some incredible healing and redemptive and just amazing stuff happen, because upstream at some night, one guy was like, hey, by the way, this is what's going on in my life. And we were all able to go like, all right, then we're going to show up for that.
Yeah. I think there's been this sense of, you know, how in the old days, like kings would make treaties and alliances together. Yeah. And say like I got your back. And I feel like that's what we've kind of done in the Forge. We've kind of made this, you know, covenants with each other, these agreements, these alliances with each other. It's like, come hell or high water, like, I got your back. I'm going to fight for you, for your family, for your marriage. Like, I'm in your corner. As long as you're showing up and you're like, you're putting it out there, what you're going through, then we have something to work with. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that vulnerability. Because, man, there's been so many times where I've gone to Forge, and every guy will say this who goes to the Forge. Every guy will say this who goes to the Forge. There are so many times it comes to like Monday night and it's 6:00 and you're thinking, oh shit, I got to be at Forge in an hour. And you do not want to go. Like maybe you looked at porn that morning, or maybe you like had a fight with your wife just before that, or you yelled at your kid, and it's just like, I do not want to go. Because I'm going to go to a place where somebody's going to ask me. You can't hide. And every guy who's gone to Forge has said that, and they always say, "Oh man, I wasn't going to come tonight, but I'm so glad I did because, you know, I got a word on this. Somebody encouraged me on, you know, on this." And so now it's kind of like a running joke at Forge. It's like, hey guys, every time Monday comes around, if you know you don't want to go,
it means you know
you should go. You know?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. All the stuff you're avoiding.
Yeah.
All the stuff you don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
The accountability piece sounds like it's a big piece where you say, like, for example, this is what I want to change, or this is what I'm dealing with. And then you come back the next week and everyone's going to ask you if you did it or not. I think that sounds like it's a big piece for men. I mean, imagine it would be.
Yeah, you're only as accountable as you want to be, though. Like some guys, and myself included, you know, I'll share stuff that like I don't really want to work on yet.
Right,
you know?
right.
But it's like, do I want to, am I going to keep showing up? Am I going to keep being open? Yeah, like there's guys on all across the spectrum, I guess, of where they are in their faith, where they are in their, you know, becoming a better man. Like, and that's okay. Like we're all in process. And I think there's a lot of grace for each other to be like, hey man, like, yeah, you're still smoking weed, but you're coming to Forge every week. That's okay.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a pretty judgment-free zone, because we know that like our job isn't to like convict other people. Like God's going to do that in their life. So we don't have to, you know, we're not beating each other over the head with a hammer of like, you know, get in line. Like there's a certain way you have to look if you're a Christian guy or you're in this group.
Right.
You know, guys are going to be in process. There's been guys who, you know, smoked for years and then they stop and then they start smoking again. And it's just like, that's fine. That's okay. Like, we're still going to love you. We're still going to, you know, encourage you, pray for you, be there for you. You know, and we've had guys too who have just decided to like step back and who've never come back. Yeah. We've reached out to them and they've made that decision not to come back. And that's always brutal because it's just like, you're just like, I've been there, man. I know what you're going through, but you think you're alone. Yeah. And you're not. There's a whole group of guys here that know in some way what you're going through, you know?
Yeah. And I don't want to misrepresent it either. We try to keep it as informal as possible. Some of the regimented stuff can be what turns you away sometimes, right? It's like, we don't have a time where like, all right, guys, everyone share, you know, where you messed up this week or how, whether have like you stuck to it. There's
guys who come every week who I don't even know, who barely said anything.
Yeah. But it's more about the space for that. And like, I think Bob's point is really good in that it's transformation happens for all of us when we want to. The first step is going like, actually, I don't like the way things are right now.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I know I'm sure you come to that with training people as well. It's you can lay out all of the stuff. You can invite and you can offer and you can cajole and you can do all the things, but until people are like, this is a thing that I really want to change, it doesn't change. And so, yeah, definitely a lot of it is making the space for that to happen.
Well, a lot of it too, like for me and like Rynier and John, I'm sure we can say too, like, was the Dale Carnegie quote, like, you become the 5 people you hang out with most. I don't know if he said hang out like that, but you become the 5 people you are around the most.
5 people you chill with.
Yeah. But like, it's true, man. Like I've become, you know, my fitness has gotten better, my finances, my marriage, how I parent, you know, my walk with the Lord, like everything has gotten better because of guys like Rynier and John and the other guys that you know, I hang out with frequently. Yeah. And if anything, it's just like, I'm always like, how can we hang out more? You know, there's once every 2 weeks, it's like, no, like, so like John Rynier will come over, we'll hang out in the hot tub for an evening and smoke cigars and chat and, or we'll, you know, have a Nerf night, or we'll do something where we can get together more. And I think that's where the real the good stuff starts coming through. I think when guys make that extra step to be like, hey man, like, you got to put, you know, 5-quarter wood in, like, can I come help split some wood? Like, hey, like, do you need help weeding your garden? Do you need help, you know, like a bunch of the guys like work with each other, like in construction and stuff, like, you know, a friend of ours who owns a painting company, there's a bunch of the guys at the group that like started working with him, and now they have this kind of, you know, this brotherhood, you know, they're listening to worship music while they're painting, and like, you know, they're sharing what's going on in their everyday life, like together. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see those kind of like, that kind of brotherhood and relationships outside of the Forge, you know?
That's one of the things I was going to say as well, because I'm not sure how many people are listening are rural PEI or in one of the cities, because there is a big difference just mindset wise, we, you know, the guys who are, you know, in the Forge, we all live, you know, within 15 minutes of each other. We all shop at this. There's one gas station and grocery store in Belfast, you know, where you will run into each other, and you know, we see each other at different things.
Every time you
church.
go to Cooper's, you're gonna see
someone. Because you're close by, or like, hey, I need to move something, or I need someone to look after my kids, or I need to whatever, and you call one of those guys. And so there's a lot more.
Yeah, John took my son home this evening because I had to come here.
There we go. Yeah, totally. That where we have a lot more just natural, easy, shared life,
right,
in the country. That, and so I was just going to say, to being in the city, because we've lived in the city in Charlottetown as well years ago when we got together, and we lived, all four of us lived within. The furthest was like Euston. I was on Pleasant Street.
Belvedere.
You were up on Belvedere, and you know, Bob was on John was on Eden, and like we were all practically within walking distance of each other. And I remember we went at one point, we were like 6 months and we hadn't seen each other.
Yeah.
Because town is just a different pace of life.
Yeah.
It's a different way of living. And so just to say, like, you have to be way more intentional, I think, in town, to make these things happen, because you're just not bumping into each other, and you're not naturally like, oh, well, just whatever. But maybe it's going to the gym together. Maybe it's, you know, grabbing coffee. Maybe it's heading out to the library and figuring something out. Or maybe it's playing a sport, or maybe it's whatever the thing is that you do, but just having those 2 or 3 guys that you say something attention. Or one of the things we do is every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. we pray together. But
it's just on Skype. Yeah.
And so we just have a set date that, like, at 6 a.m. we're all up. We do 45 minutes of just, mainly it's chatting. Honestly, it's not that much prayer.
Like 5 minutes of prayer.
At the end, we're like, oh man, we need to pray.
All right, that's over.
Yeah, somebody prayed.
Yeah, it's like the intention is prayer, but it's sharing, right? And it's chatting and it's catching up. And so that, I think that goes to the point of if you want it, and you have a couple people who are mutually in. We've also gone through seasons where it's like one guy is like, hey guys, let's, you know, and the other guy, you know, you have one guy who's just a little cold in that season. But that is the value of this stuff, is if you have that group, then in those, you know, it's like that footprints in the sand thing, right? Of the, like, you know, the picture of like, the one set of footprints, and that one set of footprints, instead of the two, instead of like you and God walking together, the one set of footprints is when God was carrying you in those seasons. And so I think for a lot of this stuff, and a friend of mine said it to me years ago, and I have said it as well, is like, when you have friends who are going through the hard things, whether it's mental health hard things, or marriage hard things, or children hard things, and they're believing they don't have the hope that they need to walk through it, you know, whether it's a faith or whether it's simply just like, oh man, the best is yet to come, then I think our role for each other as men is to be like, I will believe that for you, right? In this season, like, I know you can't see anything better than this. I know you can't, but I'm going to believe that for you. And I'm going to live like that thing is coming, and I'm going to pray it for you, and I'm going to help you towards that end. And so sometimes that's the coming alongside, like, man, I know you don't want to show up for this, but I'm outside your house, you know, or I'm calling you and I'm calling you back because I know you missed my first call. It's the pursuit, and we all go through these seasons where we need to be pursued. And if you have some men who are there, then, you know, that group, whenever a couple are down, everyone else is up, and you can, it takes care of itself.
I think, like, to speak to anybody listening, like, there's been a seismic shift in the church, and like, when I say the church, the broader church of the world. Like, if we're just to look at Canada and PEI, like, guys have been leaving the church in droves.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a guy who's like still in the church, or you know, misses those guys who used to be connected, reach out to them, like, send them a text, like, just be like, hey man, you want to go grab some wings? And I want to just check in on you, see what's going on in your life. Yeah. Like, that text is like so hard in our minds to do, but like,
which is crazy.
Just do it. Like, just friggin'
Like,
do
hey,
it.
man, want to go get some wings?
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't
Yeah,
wanna be
it's
a
like,
bitch.
he'll be busy, man.
I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, like, he doesn't got time for that. He's a busy guy. Like, I don't want to make him feel weird. Like,
And I think
but
what you were
just do
saying
it.
earlier too, like expectations or something.
Sure.
Like we put on ourselves, like I don't want to be the guy that does it first
Yeah.
Yep.
because we got these both expectations here where like we don't do that.
But think
first
of
or
yourself as the guy on the receiving end.
Yeah.
Like getting a text from a dude who's just like, "Hey man, I'm thinking about you. I want to check in on you. Like I care about you."
Yeah.
Like I remember what like we used to have in our brotherhood, like that kind of care to a guy is like a gut punch, man. It's just like, oh man, somebody gives a shit about me. Wow. Yeah.
I think it's crazy how much like, I mean, I just see it a lot around me where there's just like what you guys are talking about is like the depth of relationships with other men and the level of support. It's crazy how much I don't see that between men and how scared, I'm a man, I feel it, how scared we are to start that. Like, you know what I mean? Like even to send a text like that, like you're scared of that, even to like, you know what I mean? Like there's always like the surface level friendships where you say hello and you talk about sports and then you walk away. It's like a guy that you work with or whatever. But like to actually, someone's got to take the first step of being like, no, let's like do something more. Let's have a deeper conversation. Like, let's make each other better. Like all this stuff you guys are talking about, like it's such a different kind of friendship and relationship that I think is missing a lot of times for guys.
It takes time to develop. It's it takes that courage though to make that first step. And if you have a relationship with a guy where you're just normally talking about weather in the sports, chances are that like if you do take that step out and be like, hey man, like things aren't great at home, or like I've been really struggling, like I can't stop like looking at porn, man, like it's really taking a toll on my life. Like chances are when you say that, dude's not gonna be like, what? Screw you, because you've already invested enough in the relationship that it'll be like, oh man, that sounds tough. Like that next step into the relationship. And like for like Rynier and John and I, like when we first started hanging out, like we were all kind of, well, John was married, Rynier met his wife at my wedding. They started dating.
First date,
there was their first date. And it was just, so we're all just kind of new in our relationships. But like what really solidified, I think, the brotherhood was when we started sharing the real depths of what was really going on. And I think, and as Christians, it was
about Eldridge's Shallows, Midlands, depths.
Shallows what?
Like he talks about Shallows, Midlands. Depths.
Oh yeah. So, well, I think that comes from the book The Shallows.
Yeah.
So we can hang out in the shallows, and like if you think of water, like you can kind of hang out in the kiddie pool of relationship in the shallows of like, everything's kind of surface level.
Yeah.
But like if you want to go deeper into the deep end of the pool, into those relationships, like the only path for that is vulnerability, is sharing, is putting yourself out there, is putting this kind of like, you don't know how it's going to be received. But like I'd say, like, I think like if you've invested any time in with a guy, shoulder to shoulder relationship, doing things together, you're already bonded to that guy. That guy already has your back. That guy already cares about you. So like the likelihood that he's just going to be like, oh, frig you, man, I don't want to talk about your real shit. Like, no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. That guy is, he's there for you. Right. So I think for a lot of guys, there's that fear, but like you don't have to go whole hog.
Yeah.
But man, I've heard from so many guys who were buddy with a guy for years and they didn't know that he was like, had the same struggle as he did,
Yeah.
Or like the guy who like commits suicide that like you didn't know he was struggling but you like worked with every day. Like,
Yeah.
cause guys are so good at hiding that. They're so good at wearing that
the
mask.
you're talking about earlier.
Yes. Yeah.
The way we've broken down the forge is like, there's like, we say wood and weather because everyone cuts their own wood and heats with wood. So, but like sports and weather, right? Is that level, say like level 1, and then level 2 would just be like something that's happening in my life. So, work is tough, and for a lot of guys, like those are the two. That second one is the like, oh man, thanks for sharing, and but then there's still like at least a couple more levels. The next level in is like, this is how I'm feeling about work being tough, right? Yeah. Work being tough is making me feel like I don't have what it takes. It's emasculating me. I'm thinking about, quitting that job, but I don't have the money for this other, and it's like, okay, whoa, whole other world there. And then what we've been talking about at the Forge lately is like, there's actually a layer under that of the like, what is it in you that makes work affect you like that?
Yeah. The identity state.
It's the identity stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, those are the things that we're like, just using that as your metric, to Bob's thing is like, you don't go from wood and weather to, by the way, I'm having an existential crisis. You go from wood and weather to just that, hey, by the way, this is what's going on in my life. Okay, cool. Let's hang out here for a bit, in that deeper part of the pool. And then we move, maybe at some point one of us is going to share the like, hey, I've started seeing a counselor because this thing's going, whoa, okay, man, cool. Thanks for sharing. And that's not one of the things we've found. And I have to find this as well, because my tendency is like, I'm like all in on like the deep stuff. That's my jam. I love the deep stuff.
I like the shallow stuff.
That's not true. You do, but Bob is an amazing gift to all of us because Bob is fun. And Bob will, when we do this, I mean, just for a plug, Bob has a Nerf business, and does Nerf parties.
That's where all this Nerf stuff's coming from.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, he's amazing.
PI Nerf Force.
PI Nerf Force. Yeah.
Sick.
And so, but like those are the kind of things, and you realize that like guys also can't hang out just right. So let me put it this way. I feel like when women have a group like this and they do this deep stuff, they'll come back from a night of like the deep soul sharing, and it's like energized them. It's like, oh man, that was so good.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. Yeah. Guys will come back from that and they're like, yes, that was good. Yes, I needed that. But like, man, I feel drained. Like that took it out of me. Yeah. What I need to like refresh is like, let's go do pool and wings and watch Top Gun and do Nerf guns, or paintball or something like that.
Women relate face to face. They're going to talk to each other. Yeah. Like how women get to build trust and relationship is face to face. Guys, it's shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. So like, let's go build something. Let's shoot each other. Let's go let's work on a project. Let's go on a mission together. Mm-hmm. That's how you create camaraderie and brotherhood, shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. And I think like most men's ministries, they do not get that. They think that men's ministries are going to be, it's basically women's ministries where let's all sit down and share our feelings and talk about the Bible and face to face. But guys, like men's ministries, like we're trying to do more of that stuff where it's like, let's go out and chop somebody's wood. Let's go out and play Nerf. Let's go out and go bass fishing and do a corn boil or, do something that isn't,
sitting in a room on couches. Yeah.
Eating cheese and crackers, staring into each other's eyes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that in order to get to that place, you have to have like, you create that safe space for those things. But yeah, one of the things I've learned is this in leading this is you have to be feeding all of those different parts, and you have to be going to all those different parts. So this is not saying, that guy that you go and watch UFC fights with, it's not saying give that up and instead you guys, start doing feelings.
Even the way we
together.
talk too, like, so another thing that we've started, we've only done like 2 of so far has been these fires, and they're out of a movement called Wild at Heart. John Eldredge, New York Times bestselling author, wrote this book like 20 years ago called Wild at Heart, and it's all about 30 years probably ago now. And it's all about, discovering God's design for the masculine soul. Yeah. And it's been probably top 3 books I've ever read probably one of the most influential books that I've ever read. And it's a massive ministry. He's written a number of New York Times bestsellers, and out of that movement came these boot camps. So we ran one of these a few years ago, where we had about 65 guys from across the Maritimes came to Camp Segi for a long weekend, where we did 10 hours of video teaching, and a bunch of we played archery, tag, and basketball, and tug of rope wars, and
through axes,
through axe throwing. Had a bunch of a lot of meat and good food, and then guys would go up in between these video sessions, these video teachings that John Eldridge led, and they would share. They were called responders, and they would share their story. So when these different themes of the videos would come up, one would be on father wound. So how your dad never met your longing as a son, right? So a guy would come up and share this is how my dad messed up. This is how my dad didn't tell me I have what it takes. This is how my dad didn't tell me he was proud of me. Which all dads
do to some extent.
To some extent, yeah. So they would share their story, and then there'd be guys would go up and share about fighting for the heart of the beauty. Right. Yeah. And how guys would share how they missed their wife's heart, or they slept around and then they met their wife and now it's hurt their marriage. And so all these different themes, guys would go up and just share stuff. Some of these guys will go up and share stuff that they've never shared before. Yeah. And just raw, brutal, and it was always so cool with these. So we've been to 4, 5, 6 of these different ones around the Maritimes, but I've always been so struck by how when a guy would go up and share the shittiest thing that he's ever done or been through, and guys, there'll be a line of guys after he's done just want to give him a hug and say thank you and honor him. Yeah. So that type of vulnerability is we just honor that. Yeah. Because it's so and guys who had never been to one, they'll always be blown away. They'll be I can't believe how powerful that was and how he shared that. And anyway, so out of this ministry, out of these boot camps that we've been a part of for many years now, the ministry of Wild at Heart, they started really promoting these fires, and these fires are basically, you sign up on their website and say, yeah, I'm going to host this fire once a month at my place. And we're going to have a campfire, and basically for a couple hours, we're going to sit around the campfire, and guys are going to share, if they want, what's going on in their life, what happened that month. And it's a place where there's no bullshit, no posing, no hey man, I bought a boat this month, aren't I cool? There's none of that. There's just raw where do you see God in your life?
What did it make you feel?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think the boat represents?
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And so guys will share then we'll just have a few questions. Man, some of the questions are just brutal every month. It's how as a guy do you feel impotent? How is a guy this month do you feel you don't have what it takes, stuff like that. So that's been good, because all that to say, with those fires, guys are sharing shoulder to shoulder, and they're all looking at the flames of the fire as they share, and they'll go deeper. It's also if you're familiar with EMDR, it's that therapy where you're looking at a light bar go back and forth. I feel it's kind of like that. Guys will be looking at the fire, and they'll be sharing shit that they don't want to share, but they're being shoulder to shoulder, not even really seeing the face of the guys looking at the fire. Guys are sharing stuff and getting stuff off their chest that has been really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm reading this book called Emotional Intelligence, and it's all about having emotional intelligence in certain situations. One of the big things that stuck with me and just reminded me of this is when you're talking to a woman, if you maintain eye contact, they feel closer and they can trust you.
Right.
Men do, after a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of eye contact,
Yeah.
and then they like to look away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you like, since I read that, I was like, wow, I see that everywhere, right?
Totally.
Because it's like, because if you stare at them too long, they think
Yeah.
they start getting like, oh, you want to fight, kind of thing. That was what it said in the book, but it was like,
or what I've noticed as well, we were talking about this lately with the like marriage podcast, talking about like talking with your wife, and like men, if like when women are like, no, I want you to like eye contact, and you like look in their eyes the whole time, but then the whole time you're just thinking about the eye contact.
yeah.
So at the end you're like, I don't know what you said. All I know is I was doing it. I was looking at you, but I don't know what happened. There's a processing thing that happens with that. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a powerful point to the difference, and we've been touching on it all night, and I do want to just, put this out there for what it's worth, that, in talking about men and talking about women and talking about all of those different things, that they're one of the things we want to celebrate or do is allow men to become good at being a man, which allows them to be good to women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We each have 3 daughters and 1 son. I'm a stay-at-home dad. Bob works in schools. Like all of this push, and this like, it sounds very man-centric, a lot of the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's very much, if I think about the things I'm learning so that I can teach my son, it's so that he can become the kind of man who doesn't hurt women.
Yeah.
And who knows who he is and what he is and all of these things, so that he's not, a terrible husband or a terrible father or just a douchebag or just any of these different things. And all the men that we are in relationship with, and even for ourselves, a lot of this comes out of this deeply held value of like, man, being a man is just a really good thing. But it's tough, and being a woman is I know it. Yeah. And being a woman is also a really good thing, and also tough, equally in its own way. And that's not, that's not to say neither of those other things and all of the extra stuff that goes on. It's just like, if you're a man, that can be good. And it's worth, enjoying that and celebrating it and being good at that. But that doesn't mean good to the exclusion of anyone else or to the detriment of anyone else. And that's what I think is really great about the spaces for men, is it's not about leaving women out. It's about taking guys out. Right? I mean, like, you have the whole space and you're like, okay, let's take these guys out here to this space where we can work on their hearts, so that they're going back in as husbands and as fathers and as brothers and as men in general, who are living in a way that blesses other people.
Yeah. I think
and giving space for women. I mean, I will just say we have, there's a sister group, not intentionally, but some of the women started up a women's group at our church called Deeper, that runs in a similar way. They have a lot more people than we do, and that has been phenomenal for them as well. There's just something about it. Same, I think, for women for different reasons, but getting away on their own in that space where you don't have, I don't know what it is, whatever women have when guys aren't there, but whatever they have, is really meaningful and helpful for them as well.
Yeah, I think, like, just to bring it back to, like, I think men are the only ones who can initiate each other into masculinity.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with the story of the elephants in the Congo.
No, I don't think so.
So there's this story, true story, where in the Congo, there was a they wanted to bring elephants back to a certain area in the Congo. So what they did was they airlifted some of these elephants over to this reserve to kind of repopulate this area. And they brought the women, the female elephants and the juvenile elephants. But these big, massive African bull elephants were just so big that the helicopter couldn't lift them. So they said, oh, that's fine. The species will still repopulate over here. But what they found was the juvenile elephants, when they started to kind of get into their into the teenage years, they started to notice that some large other animals like rhinos and hippos and stuff, they were finding them dead in the reserve. And what they figured out after like putting some like trail cameras up and stuff, they figured out that these juvenile bull elephants were kind of these marauding packs were going and goring these larger animals, hippos and rhinos, to death. Like they were just essentially doing it for sport. And this was total, behavior that they'd never seen before. And as they started to think about it, they were thinking, well, let's just bring in let's bring in one of the older bull elephants. So they got a bigger helicopter, and they transported a couple of these massive bull elephants, older ones, over, thinking that might kind of help help them out a bit. And that's exactly what they found. The bigger bull elephants actually, excuse me, they were able to, the juveniles started to watch the older bull elephants, and they stopped the goring altogether. So there was something about that we can draw from that like as younger boys have older men to watch and be around and learn what masculinity is, learn what it is like to have that kind of strength and how to use that masculine strength appropriately. So that's what we need in society. And right now, I think because we don't have those male spaces, we have young guys who are going to everything else. They're going to fake war through video games. They're going to fake sex through pornography. Yeah. They're going into gangs. They're going into violent behavior online. They're going into the incel movements and violence and degradation against women. And because they don't have those spaces of older men who have gone down the path of initiation before, who know what it means to be a man, who are solid in their masculinity and use their masculine strength appropriately, that's what I think is needed, those masculine spaces to see that. So like for us, something else that's kind of started out of Forge, I guess, for the past year, we've, between all the guys in the Forge, there's about 20 young boys under 10. And so we started doing a Christian cadets program.
Wow.
And so with badge work and, lining up and saying their pledge and allegiance and all this kind of stuff. And then we just play games and, do crafts and do badge work, do Bible studies together. And all of that is out of the work that God's done in our lives and in our community as men, to be like, we want to have a path of initiation for our sons to be able to see other people. I want my son to be able to have a relationship with Rynier and John, so that when he's a teenager and he doesn't want to talk to dad and he's mad at dad, go talk to Rynier.
Right.
Go talk to John. Like, I want the skills that Rynier has in fitness and the skills John has in finance, for my son to be able to access those things, through those relationships as well. So we've been really intentional the past few years of, how we've been asking that question a lot, or I have a lot of, what is the process of initiating sons? And so, we've started that path already because it's so needed. I want my son to be a man of consequence in the world.
The generational picture is huge, I think, because we all have this thing where like I am the center of the universe.
I'm the main character.
I'm the main character. And so, things that are unfair against me, and, things that are dumb are because I think they're dumb, or, the way people act is not okay because it's not what I agree with, or whatever those things are. Which is, again, ties into social media and everyone having their own platform to share their gripes with the world. It also means that everything becomes equal, and suddenly everyone's gripes become equal, but some of them are valid and some of them are not. But one of the things about generationalism that is amazing is this idea of we now look at a lot of the things that we are going through and doing through the eyes of, man, I'm starting when I'm 29, 30. My son gets to start now when he's 5, you know, and then, and so this is not even about us. I mean, when I look at the Forge, I'm like, this is really great for us, but this 23-year-old kid who's just joined our group in this last year, that I'm like, this is for you, man. Like you get to come through your 20s. Like when you're starting to date, this is the group of men you have around you. Yeah. When you get married and you start having, and there's a few guys who just had kids this last couple of years, and it's like, this is the group of men that you're talking to. And you have the men who are like, this is what I did, learn from these mistakes, this was wrong, or this is what I did that was right, or we know the things to be asking, and I'm like, hey man, I saw you said this thing about your wife, and I know when I was saying those things is because this was going on inside of me, and you're kind of like heading them off. And so that generationalism is huge because it creates it's the community of like, oh, this community of men now needs to bless this next community of men, but it takes you outside of yourself and it gives you something to be moving toward. And that's where, you know, something like Big Brothers Big Sisters is amazing, where camp ministries are amazing, or any kind of summer camps, really any of those opportunities where you have to pour into kids, you know, teaching younger kids, where you can enable. And there's so much sociologically, there's so much behind this in terms of gangs and fatherlessness and pornography and drug abuse and mental health, and all of that is fatherlessness is the highest correlation to suicide, high school dropout, teen pregnancy, drug abuse,
probably homelessness.
Homeless. Yeah, exactly. And so the option, what we get to do is then go like, oh, okay, I want to become a father to kids who don't have a father. And that doesn't mean adopting them all or fostering them all, but it means becoming the kind of man that when kids brush up against me in whatever sphere or arena, that's bad language, but whenever you coming across kids are coming across your path, whether it's, you know, the kids in Bob's class who are just there for a semester, but because he sees things not just in the shallows, but he's also in the depths. He's able to ask those questions and to speak those words. You're like, hey, I see you and you did that well, and I value you and I'm proud of what you did there. And those words that most of us never heard, that you get a chance to do. So I know that's a little off topic, but I do think it allows us to get out of ourselves and build into the next generation in a way that can have far-reaching, you know, consequences far deeper than just, do I feel seen and loved? Although those are amazing. Yeah. You know?
I think it's like motivation to participate in it. Like, like that whole thing about like, if you make your life better, it's not just your life, right? It's your family and it's your community. But like, just from the example of what you guys are doing, like, you might not even know everything that you'll affect, all the people that you'll affect, and all these kids that come up, and all their, like, I just think of all the fatherless kids. There's a lot of divorce now, and you know, the whole thing, you guys probably are well versed in it, like most teachers are women and all that stuff. But like, you could literally save a young boy's life just by having that whole network there that they can go into, you know?
Oh man, that would be amazing.
There's the issue of fatherlessness is really interesting to me, because it's I believe that the father-son relationship is the most powerful force in the universe.
Yeah.
And I think most Christians would probably agree with that statement.
I'd say father-child.
Yeah, father-child. Yeah.
Father-daughter too.
So like in my life, I am constantly learning how to be a son to a good father who is God the Father. So that relationship that I have with him, and all the ways that my earthly father didn't father me, my heavenly Father gets to do all that. And I'm submitting to him fathering me. And in that same way, like the relationship that I have with other men in the Forge and other guys and even authors and people that I've read, like I'm allowing those men and those authors and those people who have influenced me whether it was my youth group leader when I was younger, whatever, I'm seeing it all through the lens of like, they've fathered me in a certain way at a certain time for a certain thing that I've needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm, I think sonship, like we are all sons.
Mm.
And I think when I look at fatherlessness and this generation that isn't fathered, and then at the same time, we have a generation who doesn't like masculinity, that the masculinity is the equivalent of toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
There's no positive femininity. Like, tell me what toxic femininity looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we're not talking about that. So like, so when I see that there, on one hand, it's all masculinity is toxic. And on the other hand, we have this huge fatherless epidemic. You don't solve fatherlessness by saying that masculinity doesn't have value.
Yeah.
And I think all of that in my mind is an attack on God, to say like, God, you're not a good father.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have what it takes. So we're just going to like be orphans.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in our society and in our culture, there's this massive like orphan kind of spirit. There's this massive like I'm alone and nobody's coming for me. Nobody's coming to rescue me. I'm lost and alone, and I don't have what I need for this journey of life.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that a father does is he says, you're not alone. I'm here with you. I'll help you. And I'm generous towards you. And I'll give you everything that you need for the journey of life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to provide for you.
Mm.
And that father heart of God is what our generation of lost boys needs.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need necessarily like the guy to adopt the guy who's the kid who's fatherless. We need all guys who are growing in their awareness of their masculinity and their identity as sons of God to become spiritual fathers to anybody who's in there, who God puts in their life. So like I've fathered guys who are older than me.
Yeah.
Like I've been able to be, those words of encouragement and affirmation and praying for guys in that way. And yeah, I think God just really wants to be a father to the fatherless, that he says in the Bible. Right.
Yeah.
And, but it breaks my heart. Like when I see this fatherless generation, like there's so much damage that happens there. You think of the juvenile bulls, they're just running amok, and they need guys who know who they are to kind of set them straight.
I think there's a lot of confusion on what, like everything we talked about so far, like the struggles of man and what they struggle with, and the whole idea of having a mask, and how it's such a difference between men and women together and men by themselves. Like I think there's such a misunderstanding of men and what they need and what masculinity is. Like I think the criticism of masculinity, who knows what the origin of it is or whatever, but the sort of like from the feminine side where it's like almost like men should be more feminine. Like that's the problem. They're not connecting to their feminine side. Kind of like what we talked about earlier, where it's like they need to sit down and look at each other and talk about their feelings. And then men are just confused as well of what the hell they should do. Because like when they do that, they still feel like shit.
Right.
And they're being criticized for like having any sort of masculinity, and then they try to be vulnerable and then it gets worse. Right. But I think like what you guys are doing, and probably many others like you, is providing an actual space and an actual path. And I think we probably had that for most of our history. If you look back at like, boys were initiated ruthlessly when they turned like 13, 14 in tribes and stuff.
Yeah.
And they learned to have control, and they got humbled like horribly. But I think we're missing that. I think there's such confusion in society about what masculinity is and what men need, you know?
I think the goodness of it as well is there's a guy I really like, a philosopher named Dallas Willard, and he talks about the importance of definitions. Because I say masculinity and you're hearing something.
Yeah.
And someone else is listening and they're hearing something, which is why, you know, I know Bob's heart. I'm hearing everything he's saying and I'm like, yes. And someone's going to hear something he said in there and go, oh my goodness, he believes blank, 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 and fill in all these things that I'm like, how could you hear that? We were listening to the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the word masculinity, or when I say it's good to be a man, what I'm saying is this one thing, it's good to be a man. But what someone else is hearing is, I know what a man is, right? And this is my definition of a man. And if you think that is good, then the kind of person you must be to think that, you know, and then that falls in. Whereas exactly. if we have the space to have conversations and define, and I say, listen, when I say man, I think of the greatest man who ever lived being Jesus Christ. And I think of his, you know, being equal with God and yet choosing to offer himself as a sacrifice for people. And I think of the Bible's call for me, for my wife to respect me and to submit to me. And the way that it puts that language sounds horrific to us right now. But the very next line is that I am supposed to love her as Christ loved the church, which is literally giving his life for her. And so, you know, so then if I have a chance to define and go, okay, here's what I believe a man is. I believe a man is a man who lives and walks like Jesus, who had only intentional one-on-one conversations with people, who time and time again saw the outcast and the rejected and the broken and the least of these, and women in a time where women were not seen or cared for, who just gave value and compassion and grace in a time and in a culture where it literally, they sentenced him to death because of the way he was walking. And so if I can go, that's what I believe a man is. You'd be hard pressed to go, no, I don't like that idea of a man. Right? Actually, to go like, oh no, okay, if we can agree on that being a great picture of a man, and then I say, okay, that's the man I want to learn from. That's the kind of masculinity I want. This is the man who was the man. It was the prototypical man. Like, this is the guy we want to be like. And if I can say that's the kind of man I want to be like, then I think sometimes it can allow us to have more of a conversation around that. If we can get past the triggering of various words and our own definitions for what they are. But I think your point is absolutely valid, that masculinity and men in general are seen as, and I think part of it is this rise of women, you know, having rights and gaining equality. You know, I mean, they've always had equality. They just weren't allowed equality, or not being oppressed anymore, has been attributed to like, well, men have been the problem with that. Yeah. And so, you know, obviously what that did wasn't it. But yeah, if we can just go back to this, like, yeah, this is the man I believe men should look like. And this is the kind of masculinity. When we sit down and talk about masculinity, I'm not, like, say, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I do all of the cooking and laundry in my house, and I raise 3 daughters. My idea of being a man is not, you know, like my wife is the primary breadwinner in our home. I'm not talking about typical male tropes when I say man or masculinity. I don't cut wood. I don't, you know, whatever I don't own a lumberjacking jacket. I don't know what it is men are supposed to have to be masculine, but I don't have those things. Right. And yet I think I think maybe what this helps is if you can all go, man, somewhere in your childhood there was a man. Like just one dude. He was an uncle or a grandfather or a guy in your church or a teacher at school. I think a lot of us have like that one teacher, and you're just like, there was a quiet confidence about him that you're just like, he just knew who he was, and you felt safe around him. And I don't mean safe like he wasn't going to hurt you. I just mean like he was there, and you're just like, you know, he brought a presence where he came. Like that's what I'm talking. A man who knows what he's about. Yeah. And his insecurity doesn't hurt other people, which I think is where a lot of men are right now. Yeah. Where their insecurity is what's driving them to sex, and taking advantage of women, or, you know, hurting people relationally because they don't know who they are and they don't have space to unpack that safely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe not examples of what that should look like.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And which I think comes back to those spaces of, it's where, you know, being an amazing coach or an amazing teacher, or big brothers, big sisters, or whatever, any of those spaces you can get into. I say get into, sounds like I'm trying to push it, but any of those spaces that you are able to be in where you can have access, where kids can have access to seeing what that looks like. I think those are invaluable.
Yeah, that being said too, like I think a part of the masculine journey, I think, is also there's this great author that I love who was an apprentice to John Eldredge in the Wild at Heart series called Morgan Snyder, and he wrote this book called Becoming a King that I'm kind of going through again now and like journaling through. And one of his things is you know, the rite of passage on the road of masculinity is becoming a generalist. So I think there's a lot of men out there who feel very inadequate in their masculinity because they don't know how to do certain things. Like they don't know how to change a tire, and they don't know how to shoot a shotgun, and they don't know how to do jujitsu. And so like, I'm not a real man because that's the, you know, but I think those things are good to actually become a bit proficient in. So like for me, like, man, I've been putting off for a long time. But like I've been wanting to do jujitsu for a long time. And I know it's kind of this like next step that God's kind of like inviting me into, of like to actually be, I've had a couple instances in my life where I was met with violence. You know, I've worked in group homes and stuff like that. I've been met with violence and I didn't know how to handle myself. Like I'm a big guy and I'm strong and I work out, but like if I have to take somebody down or defend myself, like, yeah, I'm not going to do a good job of that.
Right.
You know, so I think there's something about that. Or like, you know, like I have guns, like I know how to shoot and stuff, but like another friend of ours in the military and like shoots real guns, you know, and like, so like to know how to like be comfortable around, you know, handling yourself in certain situations. And then another journey that I'm on is like how to like handle my finances better. And, you know, and I've been on this workout, you know, journey for the past, you know, couple years, and, you know, becoming proficient at certain things, I think really, as a man gives you kind of that, like, yeah, I do have what it takes. Yeah. You know, and not that you're like relying on that, like that is my masculinity, that like I'm a jack of all trades. But I think there is something like, what is that? Like when you break down on the side of the road and you don't know how to change that tire, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, not
makes
great.
You feel like pretty small. Makes you feel like a boy.
Impotent.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So like to say, hey, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to learn how to do that, just so that like I have that, like I feel competent here. And I think, you know, in our world, we've become specialized in all of our jobs so much to the point like that we like you 100 years ago, you were raised on the farm and you knew how to do everything. Yeah. Now it's like, you know how to type on a keyboard. Yeah. You know, so there's something that's been lost in the masculine soul of like how to like be a generalist. Yeah.
You know how to do like specific marketing. Like you know what I mean? Like
yeah. And I think that, like you look at the culture, like I think that's like the rise of like the prepper, right? Yeah. It's like it's the rise of like the, you know, the David Goggins and Jocko Willink and like the Joe Rogan who like do jujitsu, train hard, are successful in business. Yeah. You know, like they do it all because like
multiple spheres.
Yeah, multiple spheres of like, and that I think every guy kind of wants that. You know, you got like the Andrew Tates of the world who are like, you know, they got the car, they got the girl, they got the money, they got the platform. It's like that is appealing to this generation. Yeah. Right. So like there's a reason, like when you look at super successful influencers and guys like that, there's a reason why they're that successful, is because guys are like only not even maybe even good at one thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it seems like men have a big pull towards like self-sufficiency. even like, having a little bit of land, like growing your own food, and like having solar panels, like having your own electricity, like that whole thing of being like self-sufficient as much as possible. I think there's a pull, seems like. I think as men, we kind of have a pull towards that.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, to rely on ourselves. And that probably goes deep into our DNA, I would imagine, our
100%.
roots.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thanks so much, guys, for coming on and sharing all this stuff.
No, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And I think guys listening to it will get a lot out of it. Maybe just one question to end it off tonight. I had this thought while we were talking, like, for that initial fear of joining one of these groups or participating in this sort of thing, like, there's going to be a lot of guys that listen to this, and I'm curious you guys' thoughts on it, like, that have not participated and they hear this and they're like, that would be cool, but they still got that mask on where it's like, I don't need that shit. It's like, what would your advice be or thoughts be for those guys that are, maybe they want to join, but they're like scared to, maybe the way to put it. Because it is scary.
Oh man, totally. Yeah. I think they're the two thoughts I have are, there's two options, right? There's either like you start something on your own or you join something like this. And so I'll maybe speak to both of them just quickly. If you're looking to join something like this, then, I'll just step by step, find out who leads it, ask them to go out for, coffee, beer, wings, something like that, and tell them, what your misgivings are. And the thing we say at the Forge all the time with guys who are coming is like, you don't have to talk. Like, you can just come and listen. We've had guys who come for we've had guys come for like a couple of months and don't say a thing. They just walk in, they sit down, they sit for a couple of hours. They maybe don't even nod, or, and then they get up and they walk out, and that's it, and that is totally okay. And so I think finding a place where they're okay with your silence and making that clear, like this, I just need some time to get okay with that. Is I think how you broach getting in there. For doing it yourself, I think what I would say is, like, if you're listening to this, you think of two guys would be amazing, who you think you want to start something like this with, and you send them this episode and you say, hey, I listened to this, give me your thoughts, or let's go chat afterwards about this thing. And hopefully you pick a couple of guys who, at least one of those guys goes, yeah, that resonates with me too, man. There's something in there, and it's not what we're doing or how we're doing. It's not format. It's the idea of, like, I really would love a space where I can, where I can be a man, and we can explore what that looks like. And the starting point, I would say, if you're kind of like, oh man, how do you do that? So you've got a guy who's like, yes, and you've got two of you, and you're like, okay, what do we do here? Our startup question has always been, since the beginning, is like, how is your heart? And by heart, I just mean, like, what's going on underneath the surface of you? What is the thing that you're anxious about? What is the thing you keep that keeps wakes you up at night? What is the thing you're, like, really afraid of? Like, what's taking up most of your mental space right now? Is it really good? Is it really bad? Is it really hard? Is it really whatever? And just tell me about that thing. And I'm not going to fix you, and I'm just going to be like, oh, thank you for sharing that, and here's what's on my heart. And that's it. You started. That's the beginning of it. And then you just invite other guys into it. Bob's amazing for resources. I'm sure he'll list off a few books and things, but I really do believe that the church is an amazing place for this to happen. It's a hard place sometimes for this to happen because there are walls up even within the church. So if you're in the church, that may feel difficult, but I think starting that up within your church is a great idea. And if you're not in the church, finding a church and looking for some authenticity. Like really, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about some authentic relationship, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you're a guy listening and you feel alone and you want to be connected to other guys for a sense of brotherhood and camaraderie and, you know, just other guys to go on this journey of like discovering more of the masculine soul and what it means to be a man, and to have guys, you know, encourage you and kind of maybe be that father figure for you that you haven't had or have missed out on aspects of, like
Join a fire.
Join something that's already going. Like to be honest, like on PEI, I know most of the men's ministries and groups that are kind of going on, and like some are meeting regularly, some don't meet regularly, some are, you know, really deep, and some are just very surface level.
Yeah.
I think it's going to come down more than the event or the ministry or the night. I think more than that, it's the men the individual men that you're going to connect with. Like if Forge stopped tomorrow, like, and I only had like Rynier and John to like journey with this life together, like I'd be good. I have more masculine friends in John and Rynier than most men do statistically, right? Like most men don't have one or two other guys that know them, that know their story, that knows what's going on in their life. They don't have that guy. So I think that that individual or two guys in your life that like actually know your story, to find those guys, it's gonna take vulnerability.
Yeah.
I bet you those guys are already in your life. It's just taking that next step to be like, hey man, like, can I talk to you seriously about this? Or or just saying, man, like I really look up to you. Like, I think we have a good relationship, and like, I love all the like experiences that we've had together, and like, whatever that is, like, I would just love to like, not be weird, but like have a better friendship by talking about like some more like real stuff that's going on in our life. And just like to put this out there, like, I've been struggling with this. The likelihood that you lose that friend, like I was saying, is like pretty minimum.
Yeah.
I think if anything, like if you look in this culture right now, man, like vulnerability is at a premium.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is the currency of this generation. If
And
you can be
authenticity.
authenticity and vulnerability, like if you go there, people are so hungry for it, they'll applaud it. You know, so like a guy who already knows you, that you've already put a few miles in with, like, and you put that out there, they're going to pick that up and they're going to like breathe a sigh of relief. They're probably wanting the same thing, to talk about more real stuff than just sports and the weather. So that's what I would say. As far as like resources, man, there is so much out there. Like, don't go to Reddit. Like, don't go down to friggin', like, you know, like it's hard, man. Like, cause you can go down those paths and like you're down a rabbit hole pretty quick.
Brutal.
I would go with like the tried and true, like if you like a lot of the big podcasts out there, the reason that they're popular is because they're putting out good information. Like you go to, you know, Modern Wisdom with, you know, Chris, you go to Andrew Huberman, you know, even Joe Rogan, like he has a lot of guys on there, Cam Haines, Jocko Willink, like, you know, a lot of these guys, you know, have good messages, but I find what I get out of it a lot is like some of the guests that they have on who are talking about masculinity. So I think there's the Modern Man podcast that he's got a lot of great stuff on. The one that I'm listening to all the time is Wild at Heart podcast. They just have awesome stuff on there. Becoming a King podcast. And then just like Become Good Soil. So like, you know, once you start getting on those podcasts, then go deep and like read the books, you know, get the audio book. I'm a huge, like, man, I barely ever read like a physical copy, but like I read audio books like crazy on 1.5 speed, and just get educated a bit about what it means to be a man and to be on this journey. And then send the guy the episode. Hey man, I listened to this podcast on modern wisdom about masculinity. What do you think about this? We like Rynier and John and I, we send each other podcasts like every week, you know, and we discuss this stuff.
And I never listen to them ever.
Yeah. Just kidding. Maybe you listen to that podcast yet.
Oh yeah, that one was really good.
Yeah, that was the best.
good.
And what was your favorite
I
part?
don't have time for that. But yeah, I think that's what it takes. And like I said, like it's a step of faith.
Yeah.
It's a step of faith. But like if you're you know, if you're a Christian or you know you have some sort of faith, like ask God, would you place those guys in my life, or would you give me eyes to see who those guys are? And it's a step of faith, because and it's still vulnerable. Like, man, like there's times even now with John and Rynier, I'm like, I got to tell them that. I'm like, I don't want it. Like
Totally.
it's still vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, but I put in enough miles with John and Rynier that I know that like they're not going to beat me up. They're not going to tell me I'm stupid. They're not going to like say like, why the frig are you still struggling with that? Yep. You know, they're going to have this grace and encouragement for me that's actually life-giving. You know, they make me actually want to become a better man in how they, you know, treat me and encourage me. Yeah.
Can I share a quick story?
Sure.
Yeah. So, some time ago, in this community, we had some offense. I messed up with someone, and hurt one of the guy's feelings pretty badly through my own mistake, and we have a pretty tight knit community, and we've been working on for years now on unity and community, and it's one of those things that you're like, how do you apologize, feel like crap, you can't make someone forgive you, you can't force reconciliation, it just is what it is. And so you're just kind of like waiting, and you're trusting, we're trusting in the Lord. You're also trusting in relational equity, and like, has this much relationship, what's going to weigh out here, right? The hurt or the relationship on this. And, to this guy's credit, he showed up at my door a while later, weeks later, of not talking or doing anything, and said, I forgive you. And he gave me a hug, and he had a small gift for me that he gave me. And it was like I had this moment of like, this is real life. And this is real relationship. And this is, I messing up sucks, especially when you're in leadership. It's just brutal to let someone down. But to watch people grow from, and come along from a place of, whether it's insecurity or brokenness or any number of things, to come to a place of wholeness, of confidence, of peace, joy, unity, community, vulnerability when they haven't shared before. Like, to get to see that is like, where else would I be? Like, what do I want to be doing that is any better than this? And to get to live life alongside, my life is so much richer because of every one of the men that I know. And so it is my hope and my prayer for every man listening, and for the women as well, that you would find yourself in a community like that, whether it's something you need to put some work into, no doubt, but it is so valuable. It is so valuable. And it's fulfilling in a way that, we're built for a relationship. Yeah, we just are. We're built. There's this great line in a quote in a movie, Richard Gere movie, if anyone remembers Richard Gere, back in the day, and they're talking about marriage, and the lady says to the man, we get married so that we can witness each other's lives, so we can be a witness to each other's lives. And there's this element of loneliness that is just like, there's no one to share the stuff with. There's no one to be like, oh man, this win or this loss, this grief or this joy. There's no one to share that with. And there is something about this community that is just like, I want my life to be witnessed by other people, and living that life alongside each other is such a gift. It's such a beautiful gift. Anyway, thank you for giving us the opportunity to chat about it. We're not doing it perfectly, just so that doesn't come up
First podcast.
But I mean, even the Forge is trial and error. But it's been an amazing gift. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. That was really good. Thank you for sharing and opening up and talking about what you're doing. And I really appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you.